Sit, gather your thoughts, have a beer.
Well, hello. My name is John Durant. Welcome to Beer That Tastes Like Beer. I'm here with my friend Howard. We've sat down and decided to talk about beer a bit today. What makes you so important in the beer world? What is it that you love about it?
I'm a very, very small cog in a big, huge wheel.
Now, you brew beer, don't you?
I brew it, and I also teach home brewing.
You teach home brewing?
At the Flying Barrel in Frederick.
The Flying Barrel, very good, very good. Now, how long have you brewed beer?
20, 25 years maybe.
And you brew more than just beer. You work with mead, you work with wine. You brew coffee, you brew tea, I'm assuming, too?
Yeah, but I'd rather drink beer.
Very good, very good. Now, do you do most of the things from the Flying Barrel? Do you do your brewing at home? What is your...
An awful lot of it at the Flying Barrel, simply because everything is there and it's a lot easier to clean that up.
Yes, yes.
And the other half isn't crazy about the house smelling like hops.
Hops do have a very distinct flavor, don't they?
Who killed the skunk, I think, was the last phrase she used.
And we do get the occasional skunk up on the road, so I'm assuming that sometimes the odors will cross-pollinate.
A little bit.
Cross-pollinate a bit.
A little bit, but it's a lot easier to do at the barrel, and I can also do it in quantities bigger than 5 gallons if I want to.
Yes, yes. Now, it takes a lot of water in order to make beer. What are the qualifications for beer? What is it?
Good water, first off.
Good water. Now we're here in Braddock Heights, Maryland. Does Braddock have good water for making beer?
Ever since they got the dead deer out of the water tank, yes. Remember that?
I do. I do. I remember poor Keith up at Beachley's. They interviewed him after that, and they said, "Does that bother you that there was a dead deer in there?" He said, "Well, I drunk worse." So,
that's Keith.
That's Keith.
Yeah, biggest quality in beer, since your beer is going to be 90+% the water you started with, even if it's highly flavored. It's important to start with good water.
Yeah.
And city water is generally okay, especially if you run it through maybe a charcoal filter to get rid of some of the chlorine.
Okay.
And the boiling process and the beer making process gets rid of all the rest of it.
Okay.
So city water is good, not optimum. Well water is usually really good. Spring water is good.
So you look for dissolved solids of a certain composition.
Yeah. If you've ever tasted distilled water, it's just not worth drinking. It's so flat and plain, it has no character to it.
Yes.
And what gives water its flavors are the trace minerals and elements.
Okay, gotcha. Now, as I understand as well, when you're talking about beer, you have next thing is hops. Is that a component of it, or is that more of just a flavor that create? Is it necessary?
Hops are dual use. Yes, they're flavoring. They counteract some of the sweetness from all the grain and sugar that's in there. But also, hops are a natural preservative.
Okay.
So they'll help you keep your beer fresh.
Okay.
Especially a home brew that isn't pasteurized.
That was actually the next thought that was coming into my head. Do home brewers pasteurize beer ever?
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of a tricky thing to do, and you don't really want to warm your beer back up.
No, not usually.
But if there's enough hops in it, and especially if the alcohol content is fairly high, then it's naturally preserved.
Okay. Now, yeast. Yeast is very important, as I've been told. It's a component of beer. It's not beer without yeast.
It's not fermentable without yeast.
It's not
right.
fermentable without yeast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeast is what turns the sugar into alcohol.
Okay.
And there are 100 or so probably different strains of yeast.
Okay.
And the yeast is one of the biggest determinants of the style of your beer. There's a specific yeast for wheat beers, for Hefeweizen. The Belgian yeasts have other characteristics.
Okay.
The yeast that's used for IPAs, California ales, is another strain, and it imparts absolutely nothing in the way of flavors or aromas. Something like a Hefeweizen yeast tastes and smells of banana and clove. And that's all phenols released from the yeast during fermentation.
Okay.
Basically, yeast farts.
So you can do things naturally with the flavor of beer without adding, like in this here we're having a magic hat. They used a bit of apricot in it.
Mm-hmm.
But with proper beer making, you can create any sort of fruit flavor with a different type of yeast from somewhere else in the world.
Not so much a fruit flavor. Specific yeasts won't give you cherry or raspberry or something like that. They'll give you hints of a fruit maybe. But you can do some really neat things with yeast. You can take a yeast from one style and ferment a different style beer with it. And if you're lucky, you're going to come up with a winner. Mm-hmm. The folks down the road have a really good beer called Raging Bitch.
Oh yeah, Red Flying Dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they took a really good IPA, and instead of fermenting it with a clean fermenting California style yeast, they used a Belgian yeast.
Okay.
So you get some of the tartness, the fruitiness of the Belgian yeast, and all the hops and all the alcohol of an IPA. So they took two dissimilar styles of beer, married them together, and if I'm not mistaken, that's their biggest selling beer.
It is. Yeah, it is. We had an episode a couple of weeks ago where we did one on the Flying Dog Numero Uno. It was we got those warm couple of days there in a row, and we thought, what better way to celebrate a little bit of unseasonal warmth than to have a nice summertime beverage. So it was quite a treat. So now when you make a batch, how many bottles come out of what would you use, like 5 gallons of water?
Yeah, the standard batch is generally 5 gallons.
Okay.
It's easily handled. You get about 50 bottles of beer, 50 12-ounces.
Okay. Now, how does that compare, like, for somebody watching here, and they're saying, well, is it worth it to go out and start making beer on my own? Can I just go out and buy 50 bottles of beer? And is it more cost effective to make your own? Is it how long in the process till it starts paying off as a beer maker?
Well, there's certain economics of scale. Generally, a larger batch will cost less than a 1 gallon or 2 gallon batch, simply because you can buy things in larger quantity.
Yeah.
Standard batch is 5 gallons.
Standard batch. Okay. All right. Now, if I was to want to make a full, half keg of beer, how does that work?
Get yourself a keg.
Get yourself a keg first. Okay.
Half keg is...
Or a keg, I should say.
Well, a keg is like... I forget what a keg is, gallon-wise. Somewhere around 30 gallons, maybe?
Something like
So that's sizable. If your preference for beer is Bud Light, you can get that like 30 cans for $9, $9.99.
Yes.
Home brewers are more interested in a slightly better taste or in brewing a beer specific to their own taste.
Yes.
Well, somebody else may not like the beer that I make. If I like it, that's fine.
Yes.
So a lot of brewers are making beers for their own taste. A lot of them enjoy the social aspect of getting together with a bunch of other like-minded people and, here, try this one. Or I made this a couple of weeks ago. Try that one. So it's a good social lubricant.
So down at the Flying Barrel, it's much of a social atmosphere as it is a learning atmosphere.
We try and make it fun, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no reason to make anything dull. And making beer is relatively easy. I mean, you can get very caught up in some of the technical aspects of it, some of the chemistry of it, the chemistry of your waters, things like that. But for someone starting out, it's quite easy. It's more time consuming than anything else.
Yes.
There are a number of built-in breaks where you're just standing around watching your wort boil. Have a beer.
That's it. That's it. That's it. Well, Howard, I think I've covered most of the questions I've had here, and we're probably getting close to that point of being out of time, but I'd like to thank you so very much.
My pleasure. Let me put in one plug for
Please.
Frederick's Original Ale Makers. That's the home brew club here in the county.
Ah.
And we meet at the Flying Barrel the first Monday of every month. Social hour starts at 7. The meeting starts sooner or later. And whether you're a home brewer or you're interested in home brewing or you just like good beer, stop in.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, John.
Cheers.
Have a beer. Or as a wise man once said, relax and have a home brew.